Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Rakah, Hakwadash, Barakatah. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone that rule well, and peace and salutations to Yahakim out there pushing this word in truth. This is the Brother Rai with another video, and I'm going to be using an article on activistpost.com titled New Federal Bill Targets Patriot Groups and Citizen Militias as Domestic Terrorists. And it's by Matt Agorist, and it reads, the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act of 2018, introduced this month in the House, is making patriot groups and citizen militias uneasy, and for good reason. It is specifically targeting them. As the bill's summary notes, the purpose of the legislation is to authorize dedicated domestic terrorism offices within the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation to analyze and monitor domestic terrorist activity and require the federal government to take steps to prevent domestic terrorism. While on the surface this sounds like a rational idea, when we dig deeper into the bill, we discover just what they mean by preventing domestic terrorism. Here's the point. According to the FBI, the definition of a domestic terrorist is individuals and/or groups inspired by or associated with primarily U.S.-based movements that espouse extremist ideologies of a political, religious, social, racial, or environmental nature. And this new act comes conveniently after that FBI report a couple of months ago talking about the rise in black identity extremist groups. And while the powers that be in the U.S. government do keep an eye on those Make America Great Patriot militias out there, they're more concerned with the Hebrew Israelites, because they know that with every camp out there preaching the word, that Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai quickens the downfall of this Kingdom America Mystery Babylon. And that brings me to Amos 8 and 11. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord Most High, that I will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but of hearing the words of Yahweh. And the elites, they don't want this kingdom to collapse, so they're going to do anything they can to get us off those streets, because they're not ready for that hardcore bondage and eventual eradication after 1,000 years. So they're going to do anything they can to link us to a domestic terrorists or a black identity extremist group. The FBI notes the specific example of two crazy individuals in Las Vegas who killed police officers in 2014. For example, the June 8th, 2014 Las Vegas shooting, during which two police officers inside a restaurant were killed in an ambush-style attack, which was committed by a married couple who held anti-government views and who intended to use the shooting to start a revolution. The bill also associates these deranged murderers with the Patriot label. However, what this bill fails to mention is that these supposed Patriot movement domestic terrorists were actually banished from real Patriot groups because they were on the police payroll and known to be provocateurs. And as you can see with these agents trying to infiltrate a real Patriot group, you can expect to see agents try to infiltrate a camp and then label themselves a black Hebrew Israelite, for example, before committing a mass shooting spree while wearing fringes and a beard and yelling Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. As the late Will Grigg wrote, after the Millers murdered 3 people, Las Vegas Metro officers Eileen Beck and Igor Soldo and Joseph Wilcox, an armed citizen who heroically tried to stop their rampage, their former handlers claimed that they were unaware of the couple's anti-police sentiments. That claim is difficult to credit, given that Jared Miller had a lengthy criminal record and the fact that the couple had made itself very prominent in protests associated with the Occupy Wall Street movement. But that is not all. The bill goes on further to credit the Southern Poverty Law Center, a group who makes hundreds of millions of dollars selling hate by labeling anyone they disagree with politically as a hate group. According to the bill, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, in 2015, for the first time in 5 years, the number of hate groups in the United States rose by 14%. The increase included a more than twofold rise in the number of Ku Klux Klan chapters. The number of anti-government militias and patriot groups also grew by 14% in 2015. And with that rise in Ku Klux Klan chapters, you can see how that's further leading to the coming race war. Yes, the KKK and neo-Nazi groups are abhorrent, Salaki, and Dylan hate, but the SPLC doesn't just target these groups like they used to, thus the reason for the increase in hate and extremist groups. As reasons John Stossel pointed out recently, SPLC once fought useful fights. They took on the Ku Klux Klan, but now they go after people on the right with whom they disagree. They are also making a killing while doing it. Morris Dees, the SPLC's co-founder, promised to stop fundraising once his endowment hit $55 million. But when he reached $55 million, he upped the bar to $100 million, saying that would allow them to cease costly fundraising. But again, when they reached $100 million, they didn't stop. Now they have $320 million, a large chunk of which is kept in offshore accounts. Really, it's on their tax forms. And when you're making that much money, there's definitely a good chance you're rubbing shoulders with the elites and taking kickbacks from the U.S. government. What is particularly disturbing about the SPLC is the fact that they failed to make any mention of openly violent and hateful groups who have been caught time and again laying waste to property and innocent people with whom they disagree. As Stossel points out, in return for those donations, the SPLC, in return for those donations to the SPLC, the world gets a group that now lists people like Ben Carson and Fox commentators Laura Ingraham, Judge Andrew Napolitano, and Jeanine Pirro as extremists, but doesn't list the leftist militant hate groups known as Antifa. Also, any mention of Antifa is conveniently absent from this bill as well. So that's further evidence to show that the SPLC is in bed with the elites in the government, because Antifa is known to be funded by George Soros, who is definitely in the circle of the elites, and Antifa is used to go out there and cause trouble. And when they do go out there, they're pro-American patriot groups on the conservative right that come out to fight against them. And with this happening, you have a divide, and you'll have more problems being caused, which will lead to the elites and the government having an excuse to bring in martial law. And this brings me to Isaiah 19:2. And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, conservative Edomites against liberal Edomites, and they shall fight everyone against his brother and everyone against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. And as things get more crazy out here with America continuing to fall, you'll see more Edomites become more extreme in their beliefs and go out there to fight, and it'll be divided between lines such as liberal versus conservative, gay versus straight, and religious versus atheist. And with this happening, the SPLC is just going to make that much more money on it, because they'll have a reason to go and try to quell the opposition between these groups. So as you can see, it all just goes in a circle. What's more, as the bill points out, in November 2017, the Federal Bureau of Investigation released its annual hate crime incident report, which found that in 2016, hate crimes increased by almost 5%, including a 19% rise in hate crimes against against American Muslims. Similarly, the previous year's report found that in 2015, hate crimes increased by 6%. Much of that increase came from a 66% rise in attacks on American Muslims. In both reports, race-based crimes were most numerous. More than 50% of those hate crimes targeted African Americans, you Judite Negro Jakes. So as you can see, it's just getting more divisive out there with people attacking this group and that group retaliating against that group, and they're just going to use it to further in martial law and their agenda, and eventually to get us off the streets. Because I've noticed at camp for the past couple of weeks, particular people have come up and asked us if we were a Muslim group, not really, and that's about as far as it goes, because a lot of them don't really go into detail as to what makes us different from a Muslim group, and just assume that since we wear fringes and headbands and preach the downfall of America, that we must be Muslims. So you can see how that could be used to further link us to, a religious extremist group or a black identity group. So we can expect more of that to come as well. And I'm going to close it off with 2nd Esdras chapter 15. I'm going to start at 14. Woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another. Slakia. Egyptian against Egyptian, liberal Edomites versus conservative Edomites, Jake versus Esau, Esau versus those other races versus Esau, etc. And swords in their hands, and you're starting to see Jake create their own militia groups. For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes. And a lot of those Make America Great Patriot militias are going to start attacking the government when they see that they have a chance to do so. And when they get their hands on some of those politicians, they're definitely going to have some fun with them. And the course of their actions shall stand in their power. I'm going to close it with Jeremiah 30:7. Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. And that's what all this stuff is leading to, is Jacob's trouble. And the other hopeful elect and myself out there can only hope that we're of the number and don't suffer the same fate as a lot of these 2/3 will. And with that, I hope you brothers were edified. Till next time, Shalom.